This is our first lecture on mass communication studies. As discussed earlier, in the earlier video, which was an introductory to the whole course, I told you that the way we are approaching mass communication studies is to study it within the context of communication models. Communication studies in itself is a huge discipline, and it's not easy to just include everything, because at the end of the day you will find yourself more confused than ever. So what we are doing right here is that we are taking models as one way of understanding mass communication. For that, the book is Communication Model. Communication models I have already told you, and you also have it on, the soft copy of the book is with you. I sent it yesterday, so there won't be any issue in getting the readings. Since it's a changed course outline, we are restricting ourselves to some areas and taking out others. What we'll be doing, that you do the readings, like the first 12 pages or 11 pages of this book. The first chapter, it's Introduction to Communication Models, Uses and Abuses of Models, Definition and Terms, Early Communication Models, and Mass Communication Research. So that's all. That's the whole course that you have to cover in the first part. In totality, we have 7 parts. We have already discussed this part, but just because of the huge break, I will just record a video for this one, and if you have any questions, do feel free to contact me. The first thing is, why do we need to read models? Because models give us an organized, structured understanding of process of communication. Like, many students who are interested in what they call journalism studies think that they will be doing practical journalism. Why do they study theory? Well, sometimes you can convince them then that studying theory might be useful in understanding the socio-political and cultural contexts of their everyday experience. But when someone asks you to study models, you'll say, what's the use of studying models? How would I use them? I think it's very important that you understand the context of the way people interact with you, and the way you talk to others, and the way your mass communication structure works, and the way you interact with politics and society. There is this underlying understanding which will make your job as a journalist easy. Just don't take your job as a journalist. For example, if you are a reporter, you think that your job is to collect certain information about a certain event and then write it, or speak about it, or make a video of it. But narration of events is not simply journalism. And right now, more than ever, it has become obsolete. Most of the people are discussing what is the role of a journalist, when even a bystander to an event with a phone will have a video of it and will have all the 5 W's there, along with the proof of happening. Yes, it's just timestamp and it's there. It's happening now. So what's left there? Just to show that story, just to show that video which covers the event and then to tell this is how it happened. So people say, what's your role in it? And most people are focusing right now on analysis of events. Now, analysis of events is a very different thing than simply writing a story. It's more about what are the contexts within which works, what happens first, why does something that happens first, and why the last one last, and questions like that. So my point here is that be patient with models. and understand mass communication studies through these models, because this is the very beginning of the subject. When you move on, this is a basic course in models. This is simple. We are taking not much difficult Dennis McRae and Sven Vindal. This is one of the basic books, and these are interesting. These are not so complicated either. So the study of models is becoming increasingly important, more important than it ever was, because right now you are supposed to give context. You are supposed to give commentaries, which is not possible unless you know the underlying currents of every happening and how does it, not that is it a political event or is it a social event, but rather why do people do certain things. So this ranges from basic psychology to anthropology, just goes everywhere, political science and history. You don't study all of that, but what you do is you study models, you study mass communication theories, you have a holistic understanding of the process of communication which you are supposed to report. So let's begin with it. The first question, I think, partially answered that why do we study models. Our approach right here would be studying models in a historical context, like which was the first one, how did it begin, and then come forward. Why do we do that? Because this is the easiest way to do it. This also gives us the journey of modern mass media in a historical context. When did some media develop and how did they work? What are our ideas about communication as a process? So there is this very important aspect of understanding communication as a process. So we are looking at process and we see when did our understanding of the process of communication and then its effects on people begin, and how did we understand, how did scholars start to understand the process, and how did they develop, where are we right now, how do we understand through the lens of communication theories and models the world around us, because this only gives us legitimacy in humanities or social sciences to stand as an independent discipline. Otherwise, we are just narrators of stuff, nothing. You just need the skill set, you can write a story, you have a degree. You don't need a degree. But it's increasingly becoming important to have a degree. It's no offense to all these people who think that there is no degree needed. I still think that it's needed, although I am not a journalist. I am, by the way, so I did do a bit of journalism, not local ones. And this model will also not go into the basic definition like interpersonal or intrapersonal, what is the difference, all these questions, that's a different sphere, we don't discuss it. What we are going to study, all these models are about effects and relationships and processes. So how did the process develop? How we study models in terms of effects on the communication processes and the relationship of different components of a communication process with each other. So that's the basic context. We'll discuss just 2-3 aspects kind of. Here are these uses and abuses of the model's definition and terms, and that's it. So we won't go too far. First and foremost, what is a model? A model is a simplified explanation, or rather oversimplified at times, explanation of a communication process. Like who says what through which channel to who with what possible effects. There is a process defined where we know what comes first, what's second, what's third, what's fourth, what's fifth, and how is the circle completed. So in this one sentence, we are defining one of the basic processes of every communication that happens among humans. And the same is true when we take the same model to mass communication studies. So what are the uses? One of the uses, as I explained, is the organizational function. A model organizes different steps in a communication process. Like when we say who says what, who says, like the initiator of a communication process has the power to develop a message and send it to somebody. And the one who receives has the option of responding to that. So we know where the process begins. So it organizes what comes first, second, third. You can't say that there is a, like according to this model, it's a linear model. It says, okay, there should be somebody to say something and somebody to listen to it. And there is need for a medium. So we know that there is an organizational function that a model performs. Then it explains that process basically, like I did right now. How does it happen? So first things are first, second, third, fourth. Why are these? Because somebody is there who has something to say and says it to somebody, uses a medium, the other person has the opportunity to respond, and then the sender again begins by adjusting to the response, and it goes on, and this is explaining. There is a heuristic value to all this. We generate knowledge out of these definitions of the process. Like we know, when we say all these things, what comes at last is that, yes, what did we get out of that? We now got out of this small definition and its small explanation that we know something about the way human beings interact. This is how it begins, and this is how it moves. So that's the heuristic function. Like it generates knowledge, and then it's the structural one. Like it puts those relationships with each other. Like it says, okay, the sender is connected to the message is connected to the receiver through the medium. So this is how so we know the structure. This is one of the basic models of communication, but this gives you an understanding of how it works. Again, there are some things that we call functional aspects, like what does a single part do? Like what does a medium do? So what is the function of a medium? Transmission of a message. And these are the small definitions which are the basic uses of a model. Like be it a very complicated model or the simplest one-liner that I just said, it follows the same directions. It gets complicated, but basics remains basic. What are the abuses? One of the abuses is always incomplete. Like who says what, through what channel, to who, with what possible effect. That's not all. There are many other things. It's not a linear process. You take any of the most complicated communication models and say, no, it doesn't happen like that. That we know. It's incomplete. It's oversimplified. Like it just says, some guy will just start speaking, the other will start responding. Nothing happens. Oh, there might be noise. What is the noise? It might be physical or psychological. These are very easy answers, which is not true. Human communication is more complex. So we know, but it's not problematic because we already know. We are trying to begin to understand a process of communication by giving it a simplified definition. But there is another aspect to it which is deeper underlying, which is that it always involves some concealed assumptions. And these concealed assumptions are, like when we say that who says what, I'll stick to this one. It's easy for me to, and maybe for you too. So it means that that person who begins a communication already has a message. Like that person owns the message. Like when I speak, it's my word. It doesn't need any background, but that's not true. That's the underlying assumption. I might have read a book. That information is not there. Somebody might have asked me to speak in a particular way. That information is not there. So these underlying assumptions sometimes really create a problem. Like if you meet somebody and somebody is angry with you, you might say, what did I do? But because you are just, if you begin with the process from the very interaction that you had with somebody, which is not good, you will immediately try to understand what's my fault. Like Like I didn't do anything, but the guy might be having this problem with you from earlier, or some other problem that might reflect in that communication process upon that person's behavior with you. So these are the underlying assumptions which are pitfalls of understanding models. So the good thing is that you have to be aware of those. And then we come to the other very simple area where it's kind of definitions and terms. So how would we define it? So as already said, communication, every communication process implies a few preconditions. Like we consider the process school thinks that every communication process has certain actors. Certain things should be there without whom a communication process is not possible. So it implies a person who's sending information, a person who's there to receive. Like you don't talk to the walls, you can, but then it's better to be in a madhouse. It's normally for a conversation you need two. You don't need if you wish to be on your own, but they're not healthy. So then something to say, like a message is there, and then an effect of that message. Because if somebody responds to something, there must be some content that's relevant to a communication process. So it presupposes an effect of every communication process. And then the last one is that it always takes place in a context. Like communication doesn't take place in a void. Like you can't just start a communication process without having a context. A context could be a meeting place, a context could be a happening, a context could be prior knowledge of something, whatever. But there is always a context. Whenever we speak, it's always like it. A process of communication presupposes that there are these certain components, and then there is somebody to communicate. Either somebody is there to communicate or there is somebody to receive. So at both ends, if somebody is there to receive, there might be a message for them. If somebody is there to talk, there might be somebody receiving that. And now we come to the last part of today's talk, and which is when we start with talking about the models, we have to understand what are the very basic precepts of a communication process. How does people communicate? Like you and I, whoever, like it's an action on others right now. This is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to impart some knowledge which you are supposed to have by having an action on you, basically teaching you something. So my supposition is that you don't know it already. I have to act on you to give you this knowledge. Like it's always an assumption. You might be knowing better than what I'm saying. Or interaction with others. Like you know something, you have a mind of your own, and then my wish would be that we interact with each other. When I say something, you respond. I don't think it's like that. Like critical thinking, for example. A good communication is always interactive. It's never an action of one person on another. Like the lecture itself is an action-oriented approach. It's not good. It doesn't have any critical value. But an interaction is something which gives value. That's why a face-to-face communication process is better than sending you these videos, because there is a smaller possibility of having a response. An immediate conversation is not possible. So I'm just saying something, presupposing that you might not be knowing it or you might be knowing it. The threshold is measured, but it's not clear. Or it could be a reaction to others, like if somebody says something and you respond,